So it's interesting though, because a lot of times people think they want that dark, strong, potent caffeine coffee.
It's an illusion.
Yeah.
So you're thinking bold, right? You're thinking it's stronger. You think it must have more caffeine. That's not necessarily the case.
We are live from the roastery this morning. We felt like with a lot of the questions that we've gotten over really the past year, even longer, a lot of questions have come in about, just different things. And we felt like, okay, what are the top 5 questions that we've received as roasters? And we figured it'd be a good opportunity for us to record them.
Take you into the roastery.
Yeah, bring you into the roaster and just talk about the answers to some of these questions that we get asked pretty frequently. So let's get started. So what makes a coffee light, medium, or dark? So this is a question that we get pretty often as well. It's interesting because as a result of just learning this process, a lot of times you can actually look at beans for sure.
Oh, for sure.
And tell if it's a light, medium, or dark roast.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it is how long you roast it. Right? That is what dictates if it's a light roast, medium roast, or dark roast. And of course, Trey does most of the roasting, so he can elaborate on kind of the timing, because really that's what it's truly about, right? The time in which you roast. That ultimately determines if it's light, medium, or dark.
Yeah, so coffee is going to go through a couple of different phases as you roast. All coffee is going to go through the first 2 phases, which is green to yellow, and then browning phases. And then the last phase is going to be development. And that's where you're going to get your light, medium, or dark roast degree. But right between browning and the development phases of roasting, you're going to have an event which is called first crack. And coffee is going to do something similar to what like popcorn does, where it's going to release some gases that are built up throughout the roasting process, and it's going to actually make a pop.
I thought that was pretty interesting when I first learned about it, right? Because when you're standing close enough to the roaster as this process is going, I mean, you literally hear it.
It sounds like popcorn.
It sounds like popcorn.
Yeah, and so that's the kind of the point to say, okay, it's reached it's able to be consumed at that point. Now, how light, medium, or dark do you want to roast it?
Correct.
And so for us, for our purposes, anything 1 to 2 minutes would be a light or a light medium. Anything 2 minutes to 3.5 minutes.
You're talking about 1 to 2 minutes after first crack. Okay.
Yeah. So 2 to 3.5 minutes after first crack would be a medium, and then anything like 3.5 minutes on would be a dark roast. And dark roasts, they'll actually come into a second crack if you roast dark enough, and that will be like the actual cellulose of the coffee bean starting to disintegrate. And it's a fainter crack. It doesn't sound like popcorn. It's more like Velcro, like if you would separate like shh. It's more of that sound, very faint popping sound. But that's for super dark roasted coffee.
Then what about? I've heard this thing about third crack.
So third crack, it's a roaster's joke. A third crack is the machine cracking. So that's if you roast so dark that the machine has a malfunction. That's third crack.
Yeah, you don't want third crack.
We don't want third crack. We hardly go into second crack for most of our dark roasts, and that's more for a safety situation with the machine and with the coffee, not making sure it doesn't catch on fire or anything crazy there. So. Light, medium, or dark, it's about the time and to some degree the temperature you take it after the first crack.
Cool. All right, so let's jump right into question number 2 that we get asked often as coffee roasters. Does light roast coffee have more caffeine than dark roast coffee? Now, this is one that we hear.
I think this is the single most asked question.
All the time. Yeah. I mean, if you answer it just on the surface, you would say light roast has more caffeine than dark.
It's tricky though.
Yeah,
it's tricky.
It
It's
does.
not straightforward, right? So per bean, a light roast coffee will have slightly more caffeine than a dark roast coffee, and that is because there is a chemical change as you go through the roasting process where the caffeine molecules will break down to some degree. Now, I'm going to say that the answer is yes, but it also depends, right? Because there's a couple of other variables that take place as you're roasting coffee that's going to impact it. So caffeine begins to break down through a chemical reaction at around 356 degrees Fahrenheit. And so that's pretty well into the
315 or
356.
356. Okay.
And so that's pretty well into the roasting process. So as I mentioned in the previous question, first crack occurs around 383. And so you're only 30 degrees or so off from first crack when the caffeine molecule will begin its process of breaking down. Now the molecule doesn't become completely unstable and start its chemical reaction fully until about 455 degrees, which is very, very dark. Very, very dark. We'd never take a coffee that dark at Cold Blooded Caffeine. The darkest we go is about 450. So 455, it's well into second crack, and it's very dark. And that's when you're going to start seeing a pretty steep decrease in the amount of caffeine. So up until that point, the loss is negligible.
So it's interesting though, because a lot of times people think they want that dark, strong, potent caffeine
Yes.
coffee.
It's
but-
an illusion.
Yeah.
So you're thinking bold, right? You're
Yes.
thinking it's stronger. You think it must have more caffeine. That's not necessarily the case. So there's a couple of different caveats though. Robusta coffee, we roast mostly Arabica.
Mostly Arabica,
But
correct.
there's another species of coffee that is used within mostly commodity coffee that's called Robusta, and it has a higher caffeine content. So some of your more commodity grade coffee, you may actually be getting more caffeine, and most of those coffees do roast darker to mask some of the imperfections within the Robusta, so you could be getting a higher caffeine content as a darker roast because you're using lower grade coffee. But we're talking about Arabica, right? So that's a caveat that I just wanted to mention. If we're talking about Arabica specialty grade coffee, the darker you roast per bean will have less caffeine. Now, again, I said per bean, right? But if you're using our recommendation and weighing your coffee like we did in our video with the 5 important things that you can do right now to improve your coffee.
Right.
If you're weighing your coffee, then you're gonna even skew it back the other way, right? So you lost some in the roasting process,
roast process,
but
right.
a darker roast coffee is going to have less water content to it. It's going to be a lighter bean as compared to a single bean of a lighter roast coffee, right? It's going to weigh less because you've lost a lot of that moisture content. So
if you add that,
if you weigh them,
right, and get
you're going to get more dark roast beans in a 12-ounce bag than you're going to get light roast beans. So you're going to get more beans which have less caffeine, but you're still going to get more caffeine, right? So it's gonna wash out, right? The moral of the story is it's going to be negligible. Don't choose light versus dark.
purely
Arabica based on
if you want
whether you want more caffeine or not.
right. Yeah. So
it's a tricky question.
highly technical.
I think it's a
answer.
good question. I mean, I think it's a legitimately good question.
It is.
Because I think it gets misrepresented a fair amount. I think it's less significant than like the myth gives it credit for.
Yeah. Agree. And like you said, like it gets very technical. Depending on what you want to know about the coffee you're drinking, can really sway what that answer is one way or the other. So really not an easy answer, but I mean that's the true accurate answer for it right there. All right. Next question we get: what does single origin versus blend mean?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one as well.
Yeah.
We hear it often, and a lot of
It's
people.
more of a marketing thing, right? So like you're talking about roasted coffee at this point, right?
Yeah.
So all most coffee comes in single origin, right? It comes from a single source, it's bagged, and it comes to us, right? So we're talking about marketing for roasted coffee, whether it's marketed as a single origin versus a blend. So
I mean, So when you buying it, of course, you're buying it from an origin place, Honduras, Papua New Guinea, Mexico, Brazil, Colombia. All those are just single origin bags of coffee that we buy. Now, the blends can be done pre-roast or post-roast, right?
They can be.
So blends are created, like for us, we have, oh my gosh, I don't know, I think it was, what do we have, 30
something.
30 plus
it changes
different blends that we have.
But
and some of them are pre-blended and some are, blended pre-roast.
Yeah, we combine the green coffee,
right,
and then roast
roast, and then there's some you roast, and then you combine them together afterwards, right?
Yeah. So the thing with single origin coffee is that, again, it's more of a marketing term, right? So it can be a little bit flexible in its definition, but generally what it means when you talk about single origin is that you can tie that coffee back to a single estate, single farm, single cooperative, or a single wash station. So somewhere where it was either harvested or manufactured in the country, that's where you can tie it back to. And then you can trace that all the way through the roast process. From a single farm or a single cooperative all the way through to the roasted bag. That's single origin. You can have blends from the same country. So you can have a Colombian blend, right? And it's from different cooperatives, different farms, different wash stations within Colombia. That would be a Colombian blend. It's not a single origin. Just because it's from the same country doesn't make it a single origin, which gets it tricky. I mean,
Again.
At least, so that's my definition of single origin. I think that's the one that a lot of roasters would accept. But again, it's a marketing term.
Yeah.
Just like any other marketing term, it can be used at the roaster's will to meet that marketing term. So there's no guidelines as to what a single origin coffee is.
Gotcha.
But for us, it can be traced back to a single farm or cooperative within the growing country, as opposed to a blend, which can be from anywhere. It could be beans from across the world that are combined, but we do that specifically to bring out different flavor characteristics.
That kind of leads to the next question a little bit, though, right? Talking a little bit about the blends themselves, and the question is, do we do our own blends?
This one, I've gotten this question more frequently recently.
Really?
Yeah. So I included it in here because I just wanted to clear the air. Not that it's bad to buy blends, but it just doesn't happen. Like, roasters just don't buy blends. Like, we absolutely blend everything ourselves. There are companies that sell raw coffee that you can blend yourself, but those are mostly marketed towards home roasters that want a cowboy blend or a holiday blend or something. They will sell you 1 pound at a time of green coffee. We don't do that. We buy in 60 or 69 kilogram bags and blend it ourselves. And we do that for 2 reasons. So there's 2 reasons why roasters blend. One, they're looking for a unique flavor profile, something specific that a customer or that they themselves want to offer. And another 2, quite frankly, is expense. So you're able to manipulate coffees to get a flavor profile you want while using less expensive coffee as a component, so you can mitigate some of those costs of the other green coffee. So there's 2 reasons. Single origin coffee, it is what it is per pound. If you want a single origin coffee, you have to pay this amount. But with a blend, you can mix in various coffees from different regions that are various price points, and you can average out what that price point is going to be and make it more affordable for your customers.
So a lot of times what we end up doing is actually working with customers that want a specific taste profile, and we'll start putting blends together based on how they describe it, right? And then from there, we'll come up and offer a tasting to make sure it meets their need and satisfies whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish. And a lot of times what you'll see in the stores and on shelves when people say, oh, I got this Hawaiian Kona blend or Jamaican blend, a lot of times it has probably about 10%.
10% is the threshold, yeah. So for those that aren't aware, it's 10%. If it contains 10% Hawaii or coffee or 10% Jamaican coffee, you can call it a Hawaii blend or a Jamaican blend. So it's only got to contain 10%.
And the other 90% can be whatever. I mean, whatever brings out that kind of taste that you want, but doesn't lose, the Jamaican or the Hawaiian Kona or whatever it is that, creates that other 10%. So it's interesting, though, that's the way that it is kind of set up. But to answer the question, yes, we do all of our blends ourselves, like we mentioned earlier. Some of them we do pre-roast, and some of them we do post-roast. All right, last question. Can I brew this coffee at home?
This is probably the second most asked question that we get, and it was the question that I least expected. But I think it makes sense because when we do trade shows, we bring our pour-over setups. So for those of you that have seen this at a show, you'll see that we have our kettles and our Chemexes and everything out there. And the question that we get the most back is, can I make this same thing but use my home coffee maker? Yes. You can use our coffee. You can use any coffee in any way that you see fit. It's all the same product. Some may be roasted or perfected for a special purpose. Like you have some coffees that are more tailored to espresso. You have some coffees that are more tailored to pour over. But you can use any of those coffees in any method that you choose. The caveat is ground size.
That's right.
So that is the only difference that you would have to take using our coffee as a pour over versus as a like a drip coffee, a Mr. Coffee or something like that, or a Keurig reusable cup or anything like that. You can use it all, except just make sure that the ground size is correct. Now we try and help you out with that. Any coffee that you buy from us pre-ground is ground for a home drip coffee maker, Keurig, Mr. Coffee, all that stuff. That's how it's ground, except for our specific cold brew coffees.
Yeah,
if they're marketed as cold brew, we grind them coarser for cold brew. But all the other pre-ground coffee is ground for your home coffee makers. If you do want a different grind size, you would have to email us. We're happy to do that. It's just not something that we offer standard. But circling back to answer the question, absolutely, you can use any of our coffee in any of your home coffee equipment. Just verify your ground size.
Shameless plug, if you do also want to look like us when you're doing a pour over, we have our custom logoed Chemexes available on the website, so you can actually order one of those as well.
I'll drop the link down in the bottom for you to check it out. They're really nice, and we have only offered them one time before at a show, so they're pretty exclusive. So get yours today, coldbloodedcaffeine.com.
All right, so that is the top 5 questions we get asked as coffee roasters. Hopefully this was helpful to you.
And just because we answered them on the video, please continue to ask questions at shows. We like talking coffee, so just because I answered the question here, I'm not going to embarrass you if you ask the question at a show or something like that. We like talking coffee, so if you guys like this video, we'll keep collecting some more questions that we get asked, and we'll throw them back out there in a future video.
Yep. All right, thanks for tuning in.
All right, we'll catch you next time.